Welcome to Virtual Fall in the Field 2021, Reimagining Resiliency, Building Community Through Ecology. In this lesson, we will be exploring different ecosystems found along the Northern California and Southern Oregon coast, including redwood forests, marshes, and the coastline. Each of these three ecosystems are located within close proximity to each other, yet they manage to be vastly different and full of biodiversity. The lands featured in this video have been home to people since time immemorial, including the Yurok, Wiyot, and Tolowa peoples who continue to steward this land today and work tirelessly to keep these ecosystems intact. During this lesson, please feel free to complete the 3 ecosystems worksheet found linked near this video. Pause the video if you need time to locate this worksheet and come back when you are ready. Before we dive into the ecosystems of the North Coast, let's take a second and think about what we mean by an ecosystem. What comes to mind when you hear this word, ecosystem? An ecosystem is a community of living organisms that interact with each other and with their physical environment. Take a moment and draw on the back of your worksheet what you think of when you think of this word. Your drawing might include the overall structure of an ecosystem, a specific animal or plant found within an ecosystem, or something else that you think of relating to an ecosystem. Next to your drawing, write down 3 to 5 words that describe your ecosystem picture. If you're in the classroom, feel free to share what you have written down. Then, you can add 1 to 2 of the words from your drawing to the 3 ecosystems Venn diagram. Pause the video here if you need more time, and resume play when you are done. The first ecosystem we will learn about is a redwood forest. Redwood forests are temperate rainforests that are home to the tallest trees on Earth, as much as over 300 feet tall. That's more than 3 Ashland Springs hotels stacked on top of each other, or about the height of the Statue of Liberty. To get this tall takes some time, and redwoods can live well over 1,500 years. That's as far back as the time of King Arthur. More recently, in the 1800s, western expansion of the United States brought about logging that reduced these forests to a fraction of their historic range. Only 4% of pre-colonial forest remains today. Since then, conservation efforts have protected what forest is left so that we may enjoy this ecosystem for many years to come. However, this logging brought on by white settlers has resulted in patches of forest known as old growth and second growth. Old growth refers to an area of forest that was not impacted by logging and remains home to the larger and older redwood trees. Second, or new growth, refers to part of the ecosystem that has regrown since being logged and therefore has smaller and younger redwoods growing. In the redwoods, you can also find banana slugs, salamanders, black bears, and Roosevelt elk, among other wildlife. You'll also commonly see many types of ferns growing alongside redwood trees, including the western sword fern. This biodiversity extends from the understory, or ground of the forest floor, up to the canopy where the tallest parts of the trees reach the sky. Because redwoods are so tall, they can utilize fog in the canopy to collect water and direct it down towards their roots for drinking. Do you remember what unique characteristics make up a redwood forest? Let's take a moment to complete the redwoods section of our 3 ecosystems worksheet. Draw a picture of a redwood forest and then write 3 to 5 words that describe your picture. Pause the video now and return when you have finished this part of the worksheet.
The second ecosystem we will be exploring today is a marsh. Take a moment to look at this photo of the Arcata Marsh. Did you notice the large amount of water and lack of trees in this ecosystem? A marsh is a type of wetland, meaning the land is often covered by water for part of or the entire year. In the United States, if there aren't many trees in a wetland, it's called a marsh. The Arcata Marsh is just one of many marshes that can be found along the West Coast. Marshes serve an important role in a coastal ecosystem by acting as a buffer between the ocean and the land. Marshes are home to a variety of grasses and herbaceous plants which create intricate root systems that help hold the ground together and slow down shoreline erosion. Marshes also help to prevent flooding by acting like a sponge. The plants in the marsh slow down the flow of water, allowing the marsh to trap large amounts of water before slowly releasing it back into the watershed at a slower pace. The slower flow of water also allows any pollutants to be filtered by plants and microorganisms within the marsh. When water is released at a slower rate, any harmful chemicals, pollutants, or heavy metals have more time to settle into the marsh soil. These harmful materials are then removed from the water by being absorbed by plant roots or by being broken down by microorganisms that live in the wetland soil. Plants in a marsh have adapted to exist in areas of high water so that they can carry out these important ecosystem services. Common species that can be found in marshes include sedges, bulrushes, also known as cattails, rushes, and grasses. But marshes house more living things other than just plant species. Marshes are also home to a variety of wildlife species who use the marsh for nesting, migrating, and habitation purposes. Birds can often be seen in marshes. The Arcata Marsh alone sees over 300 species of bird each year. Migratory water birds, such as geese, ducks, and egrets, use marshes as stopover and foraging locations during their migration seasons. Aquatic birds, such as cormorants and terns, rely on the marsh's taller grasses for nesting and will forage on the smaller insects and crustaceans that also call the marsh home. Even mammals, such as possums, raccoons, and otters, amphibians, such as frogs and newts, and reptiles, such as snakes, can be found in a marsh ecosystem. Do you remember what unique characteristics make up a marsh? Let's take a moment to complete the marsh section of our 3 ecosystems worksheet. Draw a picture of a marsh and then write 3 to 5 words that describe your picture. Pause the video now and return when you have finished this part of the worksheet.
The third ecosystem we will be learning about today is the coastline, which is where the land meets the ocean. The coastline itself is a fantastically dynamic area. In ecology, all ecosystems are considered dynamic because they change over time. In a redwood forest, these changes tend to occur over the course of years, decades, or centuries. On the coastline, the ecosystem changes 4 times a day. There are 2 high tides and 2 low tides each day, which means that the ocean comes up higher or lower on the beach thanks to the pull of gravity from the moon. This is Trinidad State Beach in Trinidad, California at a low tide. Do you see how much of the beach is exposed and the pools of water left behind from high tide? This area that is affected by the tides here is called the Rocky Intertidal Zone, and it is home to so many cool animals that are specifically adapted to live here, meaning that their bodies have evolved to withstand the pounding waves, salt, and ever-changing wet and dry conditions. Many tide pool critters fasten themselves to rocks to prevent being whacked around by the ocean, including the California mussels and the gooseneck barnacles we see here. These animals can tolerate the drier conditions of the higher part of the Rocky Intertidal Zone, which has less exposure to water throughout the day. A little lower, we are able to see ochre stars, these big purple and orange sea stars on the same rock. The ochre stars like to pry open and eat the California mussels, so the mussels adapt to live outside of where the ochre stars can to avoid getting eaten. Below the ochre stars, we see aggregating anemones and giant green anemones, which look like flowers while underwater and pull into themselves and cover themselves with rocks, sand, and shells for protection when above water. Anemones use those pretty tentacles to catch prey when the tide is high. We can also see all sorts of seaweed and algae on this rock, which anchors itself on and photosynthesizes like plants on land. These organisms are important sources of food for other animals and provide shelter. On this same rock, we even saw 2 sea cucumbers resting during the high tide, a real treat to see as they are not a common find. So many different animals coexisting on the same boulder in this harsh environment really highlights how cool nature can be. Do you remember what unique characteristics make up a coastline? Let's take a moment to complete the coastline section of our 3 ecosystems worksheet. Draw a picture of a coastline and then write 3 to 5 words that describe your picture. Pause the video now and return when you have finished this part of the worksheet. Thanks for joining us on our trip to the coast. These beautiful ecosystems are just a day trip away from the Rogue Valley, and we are so lucky to have access to such a cool area. Even though the coast is so different from our towns, our activities here in the Rogue Valley affect these ecosystems too. For example, any pollutants in our waterways, like the Rogue River, flow down through the land and enter the ocean. These pollutants can harm the cool critters we saw in this video and ones we haven't seen, including salmon, whales, eagles, and sea lions. We have a fun activity for you to follow up after the video. Your teacher has access to our postcard worksheet, or if you are visiting us outside of the classroom, you can find it attached on our webpage. On your postcard, draw a picture of your favorite part of the coast video, or if you've been there yourself, you can draw from your memory. On the back, write a friendly note to someone you love with at least one fact from the video and one comparison of the ecosystem of the coast to the ecosystem you live within. Don't forget to design your own stamp too. Once you've finished, we would love it if you would scan in your postcards and email them to us at fallinthefield@sou.edu so we can appreciate your hard work.